Just a couple of generations ago, our grandfathers and fathers who are 21 already had mortgage, family and kids. Now we have guys in their early 20s, like myself, who are struggling to hit the same milestones. And instead we're more in awe with how an air fryer can basically fry whatever you want. And it's not like we can do exactly what people back in the day did and just pull up to France and behead the king, or even just start a family out of a whim. And it's because the entire game has changed, and the skills that are required to get to a level where, say, you want to be financially stable and start a family is not epigenetically learned, because skills that are required now, such as coding and working on Excel, isn't something that comes naturally to us. And these shifts in priority and the need for new skills mean that traditional markers of maturity are harder to reach. And what used to matter, such as physical strength, no longer really matters, unless you're like an MMA fighter. Because when you're 19, no one really seems to care whether you start a business or go out and getting drunk. But as you get closer to 25, 30 and 35, you almost get this sort of pressure around you to hit certain checkpoints, as it's a perceived sign of maturity, whether that's you getting married, having kids, or just settling down in general, which isn't necessarily right or wrong, by the way. And maybe you might say that I don't really know what I'm talking about since I'm only 22, but in my opinion, a lot of people do this to essentially send a message out to other people to give off the image that they're quote-unquote emotionally mature and have their life sorted, when in my opinion, there isn't actually much of a correlation at all. I mean, I personally don't think that it's that hard for a guy who is, say, in his late 20s to drop on one knee for a proposal and pop out a couple of kids. And this is where you get the comments from other people around him saying that, look at that guy, he's so mature. And let me paint the picture here so you can visualize what I'm really talking about. So take the same guy and fast forward 5 years. And due to the stress of the strenuous full-time job that he's working, along with trying to take care of his family, he always tells himself that he would hit the gym one day, but never really gets around to do so. And he slowly lets himself go. And naturally, his wife finds him less attractive, as he isn't the same man that she married 5 years ago. And let's just say things in the bedroom are dead. And after every shift, the poor man comes home just sat in front of the TV while his 2 kids are just running around him. He's now just pissed off with his life, always arguing with his missus on a potential divorce. And what I have described there is a very realistic scenario of what happens a lot more than you think. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a man who is displaying high levels of emotional maturity. In fact, I would argue that the act of hitting these fake checkpoints to give off the image both to himself and to other people that he is progressing through life is actually immature, as he's acted based on fear and the fact that he actually doesn't really have much going on in his life. And this causes guys especially to rush into things to only regret it later on in life. And I do think that there is something to be said here, and I'm going to agree personally with the scientific research in saying that on average, women do mature faster than men. Now, I know that statement might make you feel some type of way, but I do think it's true, since if you look out into the real world, it on average takes a little bit longer for a guy to figure things out. And many guys also feel that it's also gotten harder to grow up in the postmodern era due to a bunch of different factors. And there's actually a term for this, which I'm going to use in this video, and it's called the Peter Pan syndrome. And the Peter Pan syndrome, as it's mentioned in the name, is inspired by the character Peter Pan, which symbolizes the essence of what it means to be a youth. It's that childlike, joyful state which is in all of us. And it's something which I believe we should treasure and keep intact as we get older. But there is a dark side to this character, which no one really talks about, which is the fact that the Peter Pan never really grows up and takes responsibility of his life. In fact, I started to see some of these traits in myself just a couple of years ago. And thankfully, I had the self-awareness to catch on to it. And I feel like many other young guys have adopted this mentality without even realizing it. And I do think it's because of our environment, and it's one of the reasons as to why many young guys are failing to launch. So now I'm going to go more in depth as to the type of character Peter Pan really is, and whether you can identify these traits either in yourself or someone around you. So Peter Pan is a lonely individual who feels a desperate need to have friends, and many unfortunately turn to heavy alcohol consumption, drug abuse and other vices to help them feel connected to other people. And they always blame the outside world, such as society, parents or the government, as to the reasons as to why they're not where they want to be in life. Peter Pan also possesses an I don't care mentality, which stems from his negative self-image of himself. And this leads to a type of procrastination which is often more destructive than the usual procrastination that a lot of us indulge in. Because sure, a lot of us have the tendency to put things off, whether we were tired or we simply couldn't find the time that day. But if there is a deadline, we all make sure to get it done. But for Peter Pan, he would put things off fully knowing that he would never get it done, because he inherently believes that life doesn't get any better than this, as he's been told by other people, and he believes himself that youth is the best time of his life, and everything else would eventually go downhill from here. And for most of his life, Peter Pan is relying on the fact that he has this quote-unquote potential, as it's been reinforced by his peers and family members around him that he can be whatever he wants when he grows up. But that's the thing, that's all he really is, potential, which may never get fulfilled unless Peter actually does the work both physically and mentally. Also, every time after college, Peter would walk with the same 5 people that he vaguely knows from class, and all you can hear is people talking on top of one another. And if you decided to give an ear into these conversations, the group actually sounds very excited, but at the same time, the conversations feel artificial and forced, and you can't really put your finger as to the reasons as to why. Well, for Peter, it's the validation of recognition, and he would do anything to gain the group's approval in order for him to feel like he belongs, and to be more exact, to escape loneliness. Peter also pretends that he has friends, but these so-called friends rarely call him. In fact, he's the one who has to call them, and they purposely avoid telling him about a particular activity because, quite honestly, they don't want him there. And the worst thing of all is that he actually doesn't understand what's actually going on here. It's the pressure to conform for Peter, as he feels like he has to do what everybody else is doing, otherwise he'll be rejected and no one will care about it. Peter Pan also feels like he isn't being loved at home, and his only chance for warmth and human contact is by conforming to a particular group. And when it comes to dating, Peter Pan is obsessed with obtaining validation from the opposite gender, as he's influenced by cultural beliefs that sexual competency is the key to being respected as a man. And regarding relationships, Peter Pan expects his girl to act as if they were his mother, as he himself is preoccupied with seeking maternal acceptance and approval. And this infantile dependency has held him back from developing a healthy relationship. The thing is, Peter doesn't understand that adult love is conditional and it's a give and take. Instead, he's looking to take what he can for his own selfish benefit. Peter also takes his basic needs such as food, shelter and safety, provided by his parents, for granted. And instead, he focuses all his efforts onto acquiring new ways of trying to achieve pleasure and avoid all the pains of reality. There's actually a neurosis that a psychologist named Baines have come up with, and it's called the Provisional Life, which is basically when a person believes that the life that they're living right now isn't quote-unquote real life. Maybe you're in your early 20s and you have this image of what your 20s might look like, but instead you feel like you're working a full-time job that you don't particularly enjoy. It's a type of dissociation that provides a person with a false sense of reality of their situation. And in my opinion, this way of thinking is a bit flawed, since you believe that life is almost like a trial run, and your future self will get the chance to do what is quote-unquote destined for you. And let's get back to Peter, as after he leaves the education system, he still feels the need to run away from who he was in high school, despite not being the same person at all. Peter still sees himself as a loser, but still has this false hope of his potential. Almost that underdog story where he eventually gets back at all the people that done him wrong. But again, the issue is that Peter never actually ends up doing anything, and instead it's all in his head. So there is a chance that there are certain traits that you can relate from Peter, or someone you might know. And now you might be thinking, okay, what are the ways to overcome this sort of Peter Pan syndrome and actually take off? And I'm going to be completely honest here, I don't think I have all the answers, but I do think there are some advice that I can give to you, which I wish I knew when I was younger. And the number one piece of advice that I would give is to find something that you personally find truly meaningful, whether that's you progressing in a career or a passion project that you can actually sink your teeth into. So basically anything which forces you to commit to life. And if you feel a bit overwhelmed or you don't really know where to start, just remember there are 3 components of life, which are health, wealth and relationships. So get yourself into the routine of getting your body moving regularly. And also try to become more social with the purpose of connecting with other people. And also obviously nurturing the connections that you already have with people around you. And in terms of wealth, try different things out. And this should feel like you're exploring rather than it being a chore, since you're trying out different paths and you're acting out of your own free will. And trust me, by going through this process, you'll be able to simultaneously pick up certain skills whilst also reject certain ventures that you know that you would definitely not do long term. And this will give you the necessary insights on where your passions and curiosities lie. But here's the thing, right? You have to be patient with it and continue to chip away at it, even when you're not getting any immediate results, because things that are truly valuable take time. And if you are a young guy, especially who's 18 to 25, we have to realize that our brains are still developing, and you're going to go through so much change, and we can work on building the necessary skills to make our lives easier and get to where we want. Feel free to check out one of the 2 videos that are popping up on the screen, and I appreciate you watching.